Today we're previewing the upcoming plastics treaty talks in Paris. We'll also take a look at Dow's plans to build a small nuclear reactor in Texas. This is Material Insights. I'm Plastics News Editor Don Lepp. First up, in Plastics and Politics Live, Steve Toloken explains that industry groups are sending representatives to the plastics treaty negotiations, which aim to come up with an agreement to end plastic pollution. Notably, the industry groups aren't arguing to maintain the status quo for plastics.
So what's happening is, this is, I know we talk about the treaty from time to time. So like, what's new? Bing, boom. The Paris, end of May, you're having a week-long negotiating session in Paris for the second of 5 rounds to negotiate this treaty. And it's just, there's a lot of maneuvering, ahead of the talks, try to figure out which way you want the treaty discussions to go. A couple of plastic industry groups that weren't at the first round in Uruguay in November are going to this round. The Association of Plastic Recyclers, Plastic Industry Association, they'll both be there. They were not at the first round. The American Chemistry Council was the first round. They're coming back. It just seems like there's a lot, interest is growing. There's going to be about 2,600 diplomats and representatives from about 700 industry groups, environmental groups gathering for a week to try to, you're trying to steer the treaty. I guess the one thing that I was highlighting in these comments is just sort of the dynamics of the discussion. You have, you kind of referenced what we've been writing about. There's this group of companies like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nestle, some financial institutions, and they're kind of pushing the treaty in a more aggressive direction, probably more aggressive than some of the plastic industry itself would like to see it go. They came out with some statements about 2 weeks ago saying just things they want to see in the treaty. They want to see reuse, stronger language around reuse, to move away from single-use products. They want to see stronger language around extended producer responsibility programs. They want that to be like a full formal annex in the treaty. They want more language around recyclability, having it work in practice instead of being technically recyclable, and so I mean, to some extent, like you're it's very process oriented, but there are these really important discussions which are taking place around shaping the direction of the treaty. And over time, you'll see these things come back into national policies. You'll see all these ideas get much more attention, over time. Nothing that happens at these treaty negotiations has an immediate impact necessarily on what U.S. governments or state governments do, but there's just a lot of, kind of to the point you started with, Don, in 2018. There's just, the ACC had that policy statement about recycling a lot more by 2040, and that was kind of quaint. And it shows that, the pace of these treaty negotiations just show how much things are changing. So I'm trying to keep my comments short because I know we want to get to questions. So we can go into more details, I guess, if people have questions or if there's more questions.
Yeah, no, I thought it was one of the things that was interesting is talking with some of the brand owners, and they had comments about this. And it's not just like, I think maybe you would think the knee-jerk reaction is to just defend the plastics and want to continue with the status quo. But that's not their position. I think they're recognizing that the status quo is not the option, and they're trying to guide what the future direction is actually going to be.
Yeah. And I think, and the industry groups also aren't pushing the status quo either. I think there's a general recognition that a lot more needs to be done and change. It's just a question of like what the treaty says. You're getting into questions about like how prescriptive should this agreement be? How much flexibility should it have for national plans? And so it's just, I mean, we're seeing so much plastic industry interest that actually I'll be there. So just if anybody's going, reach out to us as well. We're happy to talk to anybody and everybody, in attendance. So,
as Steve mentioned, he will be covering the plastics treaty talks, so watch for his reports from Paris in the coming weeks. Finally this week, Dow took a step forward with its plan to build a small nuclear reactor to help decarbonize its plastic products. Midland, Michigan-based Dow announced that its production site in Seadrift, Texas will be the location of a proposed advanced small nuclear reactor. Dow makes polyethylene resins and ethylene feedstocks in Seadrift. If the project goes forward, it's expected to reduce the Seadrift site's carbon dioxide emissions by approximately 440,000 metric tons per year. If it's approved by the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the project could be complete by the end of the decade. That's Material Insights for this week. Make sure to follow Plastics News for all the latest materials-related news, in print and every day online at plasticsnews.com.